Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. Each episode will bring you in-depth discussion with experts, community leaders, and analysts who will share their insights, experiences, and predictions. From local elections to global diplomacy, we'll provide you with the tools and perspectives you'll need to navigate today's real-world landscape.
Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. I'm Lisa Chafee. My co-host today is Michael Nash.
Hello, hello.
And joining us in studio, we have Hilliard City Councilman Les Carrier, who also happens to be an attorney and a grandpa. And we have Mr. Greg St. Clair, who is a retired CEO and resident of Hilliard. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So what we're here to talk about today is the levy that Hilliard City Schools has on the ballot this November. It's a two-parter. We have an operating levy that is 6.9 mils, which comes out to about $242 per $100,000 in home valuation. And then there's a bond renewal at 1.84 mils. And with the economy the way it is, a lot of people are struggling now. This could potentially add to certain areas in Hilliard City Schools, such as Norwich Township, an additional $2,000 with all the levies that are on the ballot this year. Les, what's your opinion on this levy?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My goal in having this discussion is to inform the community of what's being asked of them and what the true facts really are. And so what you've got is why did we create Hilliard Taxpayers Need to Know, right?
Right.
And so let's start there, Lisa. And I think it's important for everyone to understand. It's not our goal to say no on issue 39. That's for the individual person to decide.
Right.
What our goal is, and what really we're trying to do, is inform everybody so they can make an informed decision. Now, the staff and the superintendent and the school board members are all out advocating right now, based on their vote, that this is needed money. So, I've ever since my days on the audit committee at the schools, we look. I peeled back the financials and I pulled up their 5-year forecast. They just filed in May, and to my surprise, it had $84 million cash balance. So that I was taken aback by that. I was like, that's a lot. Seems like a lot. On a $200 and some million operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially they have an $84 million balance or essentially in the bank, and they're still asking for levy with that much?
6.9 mil operating and 1.84 bond. So we can break that down, but I think that was what originated me to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? And let's have the community discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to Greg, and I've reached out to a lot of my folks and say, hey, take a look at this, because this doesn't seem right to me. So what ended up happening was, just today we met with the schools because they obviously, they saw our TV interview and they've been listening, and this feedback's coming back. I mean, I think it surprised a lot of people to hear that much money. And we were wrong. We were accused of spreading disinformation. And lo and behold, it's not 84 million, it's 91 million they have in the bank.
Holy cow.
So to put that in perspective, from May forecast that they filed with the state, their 5-year forecast, to now, that cash balance has gone up $7 million. So I can't explain why, and I still can't wrap my head around why they're asking for 6.9 mils in operating. So Greg and I both spoke today, and I'll leave Greg to I walked away from the meeting today with the school leadership and one of the school board members, and they're clearly upset because we've challenged the fact that they need that much millage,
Mm-hmm.
and they need it right now. But what no one's listening to that I can see is that how this affects the seniors in our community, fixed income.
Right.
And that's kind of what the web page. Let's face it, we're not good at the web design. We're just not. But we're trying to get the message out that, hey, if you have an average size home, if all these levies pass, here's what your tax bill is going to be.
Jeez.
So let's clarify real quick for everybody. The levies on the ballot we've got Hilliard City Schools, we've got Franklin County Children's Services.
Yep.
We've got CODA.
That's an income tax, yes.
Yes.
But it's a tax, yes.
Yeah. So all those combined, and just this recently, the Norwich Township passed a fire levy. So that's $670 additional year for the Norwich Township people.
Per 100,000.
Per-
Plus,
right.
you've got also, Lisa, you've got the library.
Right.
So-
The library tax.
So we'll let Greg get into a lot of
Yeah.
that because, man, he's a numbers guru. And Greg, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself? I think most folks know me as serving on city council and being in the community, but you're probably new to the scene. So
Sure.
take it away.
Sure. And I tried to emphasize my background of being on Wall Street and looking at lots and lots of financials over the years and being able to digest the numbers. And the first thing that really jumped out at me, because when I came into this process, I wasn't sure where I was at, because typically my wife and I have always supported school levies. And I want to digress just a little bit. I supported the Norwich Township fire levy. And, the talk at the time was, well, you understand what that's going to do to retirees and people on fixed incomes. And I said, yes, I do. But I also understand that at the time that they need service and they dial 911, that service needs to be there, because
Mm-hmm.
for years they lived in this community and possibly never used emergency services. And now they're at a point in their life where they need it, and it needs to be there. So that was my rationale for supporting the Norwich Township fire levy. But the first number that really jumped out at me when I started down this process of looking at their financials was their 2020 budget projected that in 2024, their cash balance would be $10.5 million. Their rainy day fund would be $10.5 million. And in fact, as we found out today, it's not 84 million that we thought that they published, it's 91 million. And so, and again, I draw upon my experience of looking at financials from lots of different companies, and I said, there's just something wrong here, that you could be that far off on your projections. And then as I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, it became apparent to me that not only were they off on their cash balance, they had overestimated their expenses, they underestimated their revenue, and so today they kept talking about, well, expenses are going through the roof, but they're not doing a zero budget process. Where you start with a blank piece of paper. In the business world that I came from, you start with a blank piece of paper and you do your budget. But in some government entities, you just go ahead and add on 5% to what the prior year's numbers were. And so I think that's part of the disconnect from what I'm seeing.
Well, we talked about off air. One of the things that they're not accurate on, the district is not accurate on, is enrollment. So right now they're saying that enrollment is projected to just be flat, but you did the analysis and it's actually declining, yet the cost per student between now and 2028 will go up 40.5%.
And just to jump in on that, that's double the current rate of inflation. And we all have seen how that has worked out for everybody.
Right.
I mean, it's crushing. So, and to even go even deeper than that, and Greg and I were talking about this today after our meeting with the superintendent and the treasurer, that's on top of the teachers and the personnel already getting, their wage increases have kept up pretty close. at least globally, personnel expenses have kept up globally with the rate of inflation. And that's in one of the charts that Greg gave out as well.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So right now, the HR expenses is 87.5% of their income, and it's in the union contract that every year the teachers get an automatic 3% raise no matter what.
So I prefer to talk about it globally because I think that's what the public needs to understand.
Okay.
So we created this web page, Hilliard Taxpayers Need to Know. And we've tried to, it's hard, and we've tried to distill it down because let's face it, you could read that stuff and your eyes will glaze over. right?
Exactly.
So we tried to boil it down to what's really going on. And so we took some pretty negative feedback from the schools today, and I expected some of it, and I expected there would be some blowback. But it's important to me, and I think it's really important to Greg and to everybody that they understand what's being asked of them. And it's not just buildings, folks. It's just not no new schools. The new schools portion of it is, I didn't do the calculation, Greg, maybe you did, or we can get to them. 1.84 mils, and the total ask is 6.9 plus 1.8. So it's almost 7.83 mils is what's being asked.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 of it, or 6.9 of it, is operating.
Okay, take a pause for a second.
Sure.
And let's dumb it down for those of us.
Sure.
When you say mills, that does not mean million, correct?
No, it's a tax of $1 per thousand
Okay,
on
thank you.
valuation.
So $1 per thousand, and the bond is going to pay for what? Because people need to understand what the difference is between the bond and the levy.
Correct. So the levy at 6.9 mils would generate $130 million over 10 years.
Let's just do it.
31 million.
31 million a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's blocked. So, and that's one of the arguments you hear from the schools is that valuation and that revenue stream after it's passed, because House Bill, I think it's 920, it's locked at 31 million, excuse me. So, I agree with all that. But what I question is how many mills do you need? And when do you need them? That's really the discussion we were trying to have. And it didn't go so well. But I think we did listen, and we're going to adjust some things on our webpage to clarify some things. But at the end of the day, it's really about what is the taxpayer willing to do and how do we get there? And so Greg did it. Tell him, Greg, about what you said or what you think about if we just looked at it and said, if you reduced your rate of expense by 1% over the next 4 years, what could that mean?
It's in excess of $10 million in savings. And so it's also important to know that 1 mil equals $4.6 million of tax revenue.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So if they could reduce expenses by just 1%
Per year.
that would, over 4 years, would be about $10.5 million. So you divide that by 4.6, and you've got, somewhere north of 2.2, 2.4 mils.
Mm-hmm.
I did the same thing on their expense side. They, from 2023 to 2027, their expenses are so, the deficit spending, I should say, is really high, and it totals for those 4 years $102 million.
So we're looking at the computer, and we're gonna get an accurate
Yeah,
account.
we've got the website pulled up in front of us here. We'll take a look at it.
So basically, right now, you're saying the district has an expense problem.
That's my opinion.
Mhm.
And of course they refute that. And so anyway, so if you would cut spending by 1%, that's $10 million savings. So a little north of 2 mils. And then if you looked at their expenses, and in a period of, here we go.
Where am I going, Greg?
Right here.
Right.
Okay.
Right
okay.
there.
And just for the record, to everybody, this is on the webpage. It's the HSDC has an expense problem, not a revenue problem slide. And that has a lot really, if you want to get into the weeds, that's getting into the weeds.
Yeah,
folks.
that's pretty far down too.
Well-
So it's down past several items you have on the page.
So let's talk common sense just for a second.
Sure.
Right now, our economy is not in good shape. You know, people are sitting down at the kitchen table with their checkbook and their bills, and they're having to decide, do I buy groceries? Do I buy gas? Do I buy my medicine? And we all, I think the average person, when you're dealing with revenue and expenses in your own life, you're going to cut out the stuff you really don't need.
Well,
That's the responsible thing to do. And that's what I expect of our school district to be able to do that as well.
Well, so this whole process is to begin that discussion of what's reasonable.
Right.
And so it's not for Greg and I or you or any Mike or anybody to say, hey, vote no on 39. What it is good to do with these types of formats and these types of discussions is to say, here's what we know. You make your call. Now, I hesitated when I saw 84 million, and it didn't get any better when I saw 91 million today.
Right.
I'm scratching my head.
Yeah.
But I also understand, and this is something we heard a lot of blowback today. You know, Mr. Stewart said, listen, we've got a lot more things that have happened since COVID. And I said, yeah, we see you added in the personnel area, ESL teacher, or ESL support personnel, counselors. And he said the mental issues and stuff that spun out of COVID have cost us more as a community. I said, well, say that. Show us that.
Mhm.
Give us the data of how much you've hired. So we're hoping that the schools will start to do that as they have their discussions in the future as to what's really driving that expense cost up post-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at where they were in 2019 and 2020, they were going to ask for 3 or 4 mills right before COVID,
Right.
if you remember. I'll find the news
I
article.
do remember, and because that was when I was running for school board, and they were sitting on 74 million at that time.
Correct. And they still wanted 3 to 4 mills. And the discussion was we needed that because of we need to operate and it will be more if we don't do it now.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, the other thing they said, and Brian Wilson said it, it's in a news article I have from the This Week News. They're doing it because it was on a presidential cycle
Mm-hmm.
because they feel they have a better chance of the school levy passing.
They're doing it because it's a presidential cycle.
Yeah, because the turnout's higher. We all know everybody
okay.
gets jacked up over the national
Right.
election. So their belief is it's a better chance of passing.
So they think they're dollars ahead by asking for it now as opposed to later.
Right. And so that's the political side of it, Mike.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you add on the analysis, and Greg could get in the weeds with you so bad as my head's spinning sometimes. But when you figure those two things in, you say, well, I want you to come to me when you really need it.
Right.
And then the response I got today was really troubling, and it is very troubling. And it's, well, if you don't pay us this much now, it's going to be larger later.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be that way. And I think, Greg, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what Greg's trying to say is, and he calculated. He went out and calculated in a heartbeat. Here you go. And so we're not even, by the way, we're not even talking about reducing expenses and cutting people. What we're talking about is lowering the rate of expense increases. I think that's hugely important to understand. Hilliard taxpayers need to know is not saying, oh, you got to cut teachers. Now, that's what they're going to say. I'll bet you a paycheck that's what they're going to say. And it's not. It has nothing. It's simply slow down the rate of expense to manage it so we can absorb it as a community because seniors can't take this,
Right.
man.
Exactly. And I'm sitting here not as a senior, but as a middle age person.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your website. You said the median home value is $375,000. The home that I own is more than that, and it's going to be $2,000 a year. Well, I don't have $91 million in reserve. You know, I could probably scratch together 2,000 reserve probably, but I don't have that much reserve to use, and they have that in reserve. So I'm just to the average person who isn't a mathematician, you know.
Well, and the
Help
other
us
thing,
understand that.
so I'm looking at the district's website, and they have a little blurb about the operating levy, the bond issue, explaining what they are, and then it says, first levy request in 8 years.
And they should be proud of that. And part of the reason that has happened is because COVID hit and they had all that. I called it ARPA money because that's what the city got. But everybody got infusions from the feds to absorb COVID,
Right.
all the special things that occurred. And I think Greg took a look at that. And that's why we went back to 2020 and looked at their forecast there to see how accurate it was. from 4 years, 2020 to 24. We skipped over COVID basically.
Right.
And that's why, the alarm bells are going off. Guys, you're saying you're going to have 10 and a half and you got 91 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably, I don't know if we calculated it because we just learned it. What's 91 million on their current operating budgets? Is it 46, 48%?
Yeah, because
84 was
42% or
Yeah,
43%. So
and anybody that's good at algebra can back into that one.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important for people to know we are not anti-teacher, we're not anti-district, but we have to be responsible, and we don't want to price seniors out of their homes. Heck, I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs, and if my property taxes go up like that much, I'm really going to be struggling even more.
Where how do you find it? And to the school's defense, and I think we tried to have this discussion today. Some of it is on the legislature. The state legislature and how it's funded and what's going on there. But it is what it is. And so that's our ultimate goal is really just, let's get the information out there. Yeah. And Greg, I can't thank you enough. You've done a great job putting different charts out there. Kind of reminds me when I was young at Paul Lambert days where you put all the data out there, let everyone look at it.
Yeah.
And
well, to me, it's because I've been in this position, leading large departments and having to make budgets, and it's easier, in my opinion, to just go to the community and say, we need $31 million a year versus making the very difficult decisions of, well, here's what we're going to cut. And here's how much we're going to cut back. But to go back to an earlier conversation, their deficit spending, for a 4-year period is $102 million. It ends up being about $20.5 million a year. And so if you look at 1 mil equals $4.6 million, I said today to the treasurer and to the superintendent, I said, that tells me that somewhere north of 4 mils would cover your deficit spending and basically maintain your cash reserves. And I don't think we ever got an answer to that.
no, we got chewed out. But
Well, here's something. So I'm looking at their website, and they have their FAQs, and the board now has a policy requiring that the district maintain a cash reserve equal to 20% of its operating expenses to ensure sound financial management. And by 2026, their cash balance will fall below this 20% threshold. But that's 2 years away.
Well, let's be careful because that's true, Lisa. But also remember, just like the fire levy for Norwich just passed in the spring, they don't start receiving that income until the following year after the tax has been implemented.
Right.
And so you've got a timing issue that comes out of there.
Okay.
And so you have to be careful. But I agree with you that there is definitely room to delay or to take a look at it. Greg, you said it best: wrong amount, wrong time. And so, and whether that's your judgment, if you're listening to us, or if that's your judgment after you've looked at the financials, that's up to you. My goal here is, and I think all of our goal here is take a look, get educated before you vote on what's really being asked of you and how it's going to impact your community. So that's an important piece. We got to make sure we understand. So when should they ask? Well, if you slow down the rate of expense increase per year, you have a chance to make that 227 instead of 226. $10 million, right? If you went out, maybe 8 or 9 million, whatever the numbers are. Plus your revenues have always been underestimated a little bit, and your expenses have always been overestimated. We've shown that. So I think, each year's different. I give the treasurer a lot of credit because it's hard to forecast when every year the Capitol or the State House changes the formula. If anyone's ever read that formula, good luck. If you can figure it out, good luck. So, but we just want to make sure that we aren't anti-teacher. We love our schools. Our schools are so important to the community. But we also say there has to be some balance, and community's got to have a chance to absorb the shock that we just got from all this inflation and ability to try to catch up. look at Social Security. Is Social Security rate rose 20% in what they're paying out to everybody? The answer is obviously no.
Right.
So how do people on fixed income that are living and retired handle this stuff?
And now those people living on Social Security, that income is being taxed now.
Yeah,
And
it
that makes a big difference.
Sure it does. So it's really, I want to thank Greg and thank you for getting us out here today. What I want to ask of people that if you listen, go to the webpage. We've got a contact where you can email us questions. Those are actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
I know
To talk about that again, the webpage. I'm looking at it right here. This is let's describe this webpage again. It's Hilliard Taxpayers Need to I can't talk now.
HilliardTaxpayersNeedToKnow.com.
there you go.
Thank you, Lisa.
And it starts out with evaluation and then a couple tabs, but right in the middle there's a contact. Hit that button and ask us a question because we want to go dig and get an answer out to everybody.
And we also want to let people know we'll be glad to come to you. If you want to host some people in your home, we'll come and present this. On September 24th, we are going to be at Station Bar in Old Hilliard at 6 o'clock to do a presentation on this as well. It's free and open to the public.
Yeah. So I want to encourage everyone in this process. And this is to a lot of the city leaders and a lot of folks that are going to be upset because they think that we're coming out against them. And that is simply not the case.
No, we're not.
But what it is a chance to have a really good dialogue so that everyone makes an informed decision.
Correct.
And I can't tell you how important that is. And given today's society and where we are, I think it would be really good to have that.
Yeah.
Have that civil discussion, that respect between each other to say, I just disagree because of this. And have it be fact-based and have the respect enough to listen to their side. That's what I did today with the superintendent and the treasurer and a board member. And I hope everyone will do the same.
Well, I'd also like to encourage them to get with members of the community, get with members of the state legislature, and let's work the problem and figure out how we can better fund our schools without having to tax us all to death.
Yeah, it's a challenging issue. It's coming to a head. In Hilliard, we've tried to increase the commercial development to offset that residential demand for tax dollars, and we've done a really good job at the city. Obviously, by the length of the levees being stretched over the last two, I think we've had one, and it's been 12 years, 1 in 12 or 14 years. I can't remember exactly. So we're working on that, and that's part of the discussion I had today. My entire time in service here in the community has been based on how it affects the firefighters and how it affects the teachers. And is it a win for the community?
Right.
So coming out and talking about this cash cushion, the cash reserve, and all the concerns I have about 7 mills on, really 8.7, it's 8.83 mills. It's almost 9 mills. It's really a heavy load on top of everything else that's being asked.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And remember, everybody, go to HilliardTaxpayersNeedToKnow.com.
And taxpayers is one word because sometimes that can mess you up.
Right. Also, I'm also seeing your webpage, your it's your Facebook page as well. Facebook page is Hilliard Taxpayers Need to Know. Big picture of a Ben Franklin there. And if this goes through, there'll be a lot of Ben Franklins that'll be going through. So, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is Straight Shot Politics.
Thank you.
Thank you.